listening to The Weather Junkies.
Oh boy. Large wedge tornado coming up into Tuscaloosa. A winter storm warning is in effect for our area.
So we can expect at least another 2 to 4 inches overnight. Then that sounds
The National Weather Service has issued a tornado warning for northwestern Massachusetts.
Good Thursday evening. Thanks for joining us on the Weather Junkies. I'm Tyler Jankowski, joining the show from Connecticut, as always, joined alongside by Dakota Smith in Colorado. Dakota.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us again. And tonight we have on a special guest in Becky Elliot. She's a meteorologist at Accuweather, and she graduated from the University of Northern Colorado with a degree in meteorology. Welcome, Becky.
Hi, glad to be here.
So, you're based in Pennsylvania?
Correct.
Yeah.
College, Pennsylvania.
How's the weather out there?
It is rainy, but you know what? It's a warm rain, and that's a huge step up from the cold rain that it's been a lot this winter, so I'll take it.
Nice. Yeah, I can't complain out here. We've had past 2 sunny days, and it's gotten into the upper 60s, lower 70s. So pretty boring weather, actually, but really nice. Tyler, how about you? I'm pretty sure you guys broke a couple of records out there in the Northeast.
Yeah, very similar to the weather that Becky was talking about. We have dew points in the 50s. We set a record today. We had a high of 72. Crazy for March. We have, let's see, 5 total records this week. Looks like that'll be it. We had 3 high temperatures and 3 high mins that were set at. We have 2 climate sites in Connecticut, 1 inland, 1 on the shoreline. So crazy warmth. Got to 81 yesterday, which was remarkable, above expectations. So I would concur with Becky that it is very different when you have rain when it's this warm, as opposed to your typical springtime rain with snow still on the side of the road. So it's easier to take, but I do, as a skier, realize what it's doing to the slopes. And I think a lot of ski areas here are closing this weekend. So an unfortunate season overall.
Yeah, it seemed like they opened late and are closing early.
Yeah, it's really bad. Probably one of the worst seasons in history.
Yeah.
But continuing on with the introduction of you, Becky, I'm a little bit more interested in where you're originally from and how you got into meteorology. You said Dakota said you went to a school out west?
Correct. I'm actually born and raised in Colorado, like maybe 15 minutes away from Fort Collins, where Dakota currently is. So very familiar with Fort Collins. And I went to a small school in Greeley, Colorado, which is about 20 minutes farther east, called the University of Northern Colorado. I would have loved to have gone to CSU, but they don't have an undergraduate in meteorology, unfortunately.
Yeah, I that always makes me bummed out because I wish we had undergrads in our program.
Yeah, I've heard really good things about the program.
I actually interact with some of the UNC students every now and then. Every now and then we have like a joint AMS meeting or a speaker or something.
Yeah.
They always represent a nice sized cohort. So
good to hear.
Yeah.
Can't say I would know any of them anymore.
What year did you head east to Accuweather and State College?
So that's sort of a good question. I headed east to Kansas first. I headed there in the beginning of 2012. I lived in Kansas at the Accuweather Severe Center in Wichita for 2.5 years, and then I came east to Pennsylvania in July of 2014.
So just after we graduated. So you worked in Kansas, and that actually sets us up well for our main topic once we get through a few tweets. We have some tweets we're going to go through, Dakota?
Yeah, so we were talking about the warm weather back east, and I guess we'll go to that tweet first. This tweet's from Ed Valley. You can follow him at Ed Valley Weather. And this tweet says, as of 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 26 stations have broken their daily high temperature records, and 8 have tied them. So that just goes to show you what kind of I wouldn't call it a heat wave, but like a warm wave, I guess, that broke a lot of records, stretching from West Virginia all the way to Maine. So I guess it's good if you want to be outside, bad if you're trying to get some last-minute skiing or snowboarding in.
I didn't see the map for yesterday, but I think it probably looked similar. At least here, I mean, today was about 10 degrees cooler, and we still have records all over the place. Anytime I see a map like this, it impresses me because when you see the cold map, whenever you have a cold outbreak, the number of cold records is dwarfed by the number of warm records. It's just so hard to set cold records, and seems like it's so easy to have all these warm records nowadays.
And speaking of warm records, our next tweet's from the American Geophysical Union, AGU, and they tweeted, "This winter was the warmest on record nationwide," and it shows a picture of the United States and where it was above average, much above average, or record warmest. And there's not a single, I guess these are, they look like they're divided up by what are they, Tyler?
Climate divisions?
Climate divisions, yeah, that's right. Every climate division is near average or above average from December to February. And wow, that's remarkable. I knew it was, if you thought it was warm where you live, you're not the only one. It was warm this winter pretty much everywhere in the United States.
This was really aided by the exceptional December when so many people were far above the previous #1 warmest December. I think we were like 5 degrees above the old #1 spot, which is crazy because normally you look at the top 5 warmest or coldest months, that they're separated by tenths of degrees, not
Right.
5 degrees.
That
was our December.
It was really impressive, and not only was it really warm in State College and probably a lot of locations across the Northeast, we didn't record a single snowflake. There was nothing, no snow in December.
Yeah, I think we had to wait till the 29th. We almost had a snowless December.
And we did. Actually, in State College, we're really likely to break the record for least snowiest winter ever.
Oh, wow, you are?
Yeah, so we actually did a little bit of digging and had to figure out a discrepancy. So it looks like the least snowiest winter was back in like the late 1800s, and it was 17.9 inches. And I think we're sitting at just over 16 inches right now.
Wow.
1979 was the record.
In the top 10, we are, I think, #9. They're all separated by tenths of an inch, so we could easily fall a good number. So it's not quite as impressive here, but I didn't realize that. I was hoping you could provide an impressive stat from State College, and there it is.
Yep.
Almost could very well be the least snowiest winter.
So at this point, I'm kind of rooting against snow, because if it's going to be a very snowless winter, we might as well break a record.
No, yeah, I have the same opinion. If you're so close, you might as well do it when it comes to records. Either side of the spectrum.
Totally agree.
So you guys had a warm first half of the winter. It was kind of the opposite out here. It wasn't really cold by any means in the first half, but it wasn't warm. And then February, I believe we had like our 14th warmest February of all time in Fort Collins. And we had like one dump of snow at the beginning of the year. It was like 16 inches or something, and then not a single drop of precip the rest of the month. So, yeah, I guess it makes sense, right? Different coasts, different.
Yeah.
So on to our next tweet, and let me pull this up here. This is from it's kind of along the same lines actually. It's from Assad Razouk. I think I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah.
And this tweet says, "This week, Northern Hemisphere slipped above the 2 degrees Celsius milestone for the first time in history." And obviously that's significantly aided by the strong El Nino that we had from this winter. But also it's kind of like a double, I guess a dual effect. We have global warming and this strong El Nino kind of aiding this 2-degree milestone.
Do you know what years are used for the average in order to calculate the anomaly?
I don't know the exact year. Normally it's pre-industrial, which is 1800s, early 1800s,
obviously this is very impressive. I just wanted to make sure that the average base period was not some obscure period that you could just calculate 2 Celsius. But yeah, the conference that we talked about that was across the ocean, what was it, a month or two ago? we had Bernadette Woods on to talk about it.
Yeah.
I guess the goal for the whole globe, not just the northern hemisphere, was to keep us from hitting 2C for the globe, and
Right.
at least in the northern hemisphere, we've hit it, at least touched it, in the last couple of weeks.
Right, but that certainly won't stay as.
Yeah.
And northern hemisphere is generally warmer compared to the southern hemisphere. You have more ocean and less land down there, and also less greenhouse gases being emitted. So it's kind of I guess, twofold why it's warmer up here than down there. So let's change topics completely and get into some of the weather that we saw this week. The next tweet's from Sean Milred, and the tweet is much vapor, and it's because I like the play on the Doge meme there.
Yes.
And it's a water vapor imagery of the United States, and it's just this giant plume coming out of the Gulf, and certainly enhanced by tapping into the Pacific Ocean. And wow, they've seen some flooding down there, especially in northern Louisiana and southern parts of Arkansas.
Yeah, I've been reading some tweets. Eric Blake had some really great stats today, great and terrifying stats. I think Monroe, Louisiana they've gotten like 2 weeks worth of rain in like a matter of days, or some crazy absurd stat like that. Just insane amounts.
Yikes! Yeah, I saw like 10 to 15 inches of precipitation, and that's not good anywhere you are. So and the next tweet is actually is actually drone imagery from Louisiana, and it's very, very sad. Shows some of the flooding in a residential area. Yeah, I don't know exactly where it was from, but certainly one of the big weather stories of the week. And finally, wrapping up this section, this is just some eye candy. It's from a friend of mine, Dan Lindsay. He's over here at Sierra next to Colorado State, and it says, "I know I'm way late in the game here, but here's another view of the solar eclipse 2016. It's from the Himawari satellite, and it's super cool to look at. You can see the shadow there of the moon go across the Earth, and wow, I don't know. It's kind of puts everything in perspective."
I haven't seen that yet. That's awesome. That's
yeah,
really cool.
I've seen a lot of these this week from the solar eclipse. I saw something that I forget what airline it was, but
It was Alaska. I think it was Alaska Airlines.
So you know more about it than I do.
I guess I've just seen it's been kind of all over my social media. So from what I understand, they like altered their route so that they would have like a perfect viewing, or not the route, but the time of the flight, so that they'd be able to view it in air.
Wow, good for them. I mean,
yeah.
I wish I was on that airline or that flight, because that's once in a lifetime, I guess, to see something like that. We actually have a solar eclipse here in, I think, 3 years. It's going to be in southern Wyoming, and people are already starting to make their plans for that. Yeah.
Wow.
So let's jump into the main topic tonight. And tonight we're going to talk about preparing for the upcoming severe weather season, and we're going to kind of it's going to be a very general conversation, getting into every kind of aspect of the severe weather season, whether it's the forecaster, the broadcaster, or the public, because it's a long process once a severe weather forecast is created and put out into the public. So I guess we should start with the forecast here, and we had a severe Storm Prediction Center meteorologist Patrick Marsh on a few weeks ago, and we gave him and the SPC a lot of praise, and we talked about some of the issues they're dealing with and some of the things they do well. And then a few weeks ago, Tyler was talking about a severe weather event that happened in the Northeast, and it wasn't well forecast in New England. Everywhere else it was well forecast. It was that big severe event that went across the south and then into the East Coast, and then New England saw some wind events. So my question for you is, between the SPC and National Weather Service, where do you see the biggest room for improvement when it comes to putting out severe weather forecasts and communicating them?
Is that for Tyler or for me?
Well, anyone actually.
Okay, sorry, I wasn't sure.
It's a long-winded question, but I guess one of the things we noticed that there is some conflict with is that between SPC and local National Weather Service offices, they don't always see completely eye to eye on things, and sometimes that creates a little bit of confusion. I don't know if you have any thoughts about where we can improve communicating the forecast, whether it's the National Weather Service or the Storm Prediction Center.
I see. I don't really know how the NWS is run, and I don't want to speak on something I don't know a lot about. I definitely have noticed the disconnects between offices. You have like a severe thunderstorm warning issued, and then suddenly it goes into another CWA or county warning area, and the warning just falls off and isn't continued. So I think that's something. I think there's a lot of communication breakdown between the offices, just from a very outside perspective. In general, I can't find a lot of fault with the SPC. I know there was a lot of debate when they redid the categories, and I think they could be a little confusing at times. And again, I'm a meteorologist, so it's pretty easy for me to understand. But as far as the public, that might be difficult. In general, I think the SPC does a phenomenal job forecasting severe weather.
I think the biggest issue that we have is making sure that the end user has the knowledge that we have, because when we had Patrick Marsh on the show, I think we all agreed that more often than not the forecast is pretty good, but then you always have a lot of people that didn't really know that that was the forecast. And I think nowadays there's so many ways to get your forecast information, a lot of fragmentation, and I think one of the biggest things that we need to improve is making sure that the most up-to-date forecast and the good forecast, hopefully the forecast is using a lot of what the SPC is saying, and it's not totally rogue and doesn't pay attention to that, but hopefully the best information is getting right into neighborhoods and in towns and cities everywhere across the United States. I think our biggest issue is making sure that the best forecast is communicated, and it's becoming more difficult now that the primary source of weather information may not be your local TV meteorologist. It may be a couple of apps that you have or a couple of websites that you visit, and I think a lot of times people don't have a clue about the source of the information they're getting nowadays. For example, if they're using like the sun icon on their iPhone or the thunderstorm cloud, it can be very difficult. Any thoughts on that, Dakota?
Yeah, I mean, it's always kind of an issue when there might be some inconsistency between a tiny little app that you're looking at that just says or just has an icon of a lightning bolt or something, but that doesn't really convey the message completely, unless they have the warning go across or something. I think what broadcasters are doing now, with the kind of like the constant attention during a severe weather outbreak, is great, especially when they're at I guess I want to say a good time, because a good time would be everyone's home at their house, like in the evening after work or something, and that's kind of the time slot when the afternoon or evening news starts.
Have you heard of facets from the storm, the NSSL?
No.
I haven't, no.
I just saw a post about it the other day, and anyone that's listening can Google it, but basically it's called Forecasting a Continuum of Environmental Threats, and it's basically a goal of the National Weather Service to forecast not just tornado warnings and severe thunderstorm warnings and watches, but also a more honed-in area that may be impacted by hail or tornadoes or flash flooding. It's a fascinating project, and I actually saw it flash across in a broadcasters group because there was some further concern about what this may do to communicating severe weather, and basically it looks like the people behind this project envision an app that sends out an alert that says threat for hail increasing, threat for tornado increasing, even if you're not in a tornado warning. So it's and if you look at their webpage, they have a kind of a graphic depicting the tornado warning, but the areas with the highest probability for a tornado are a much smaller area than the warning, and the goal of the program is just that, to reduce false alarm rates and improve the communication of threats even when you're not yet in a warning. So it's a fascinating thing to read up on if you're a weather junkie perhaps that's listening in, but I think it's going to further complicate how things are done. Apparently, according to the website, they're still going to issue the legacy warnings, but I mean there are so many different products. And Dakota, we had who was it that we had on talking about the complexity of the warning system and the improvements that need to be made?
Oh, Andy Horvitz.
Yes, so we've previously discussed the improvements that need to be made in simplifying our weather warning system. So I do think our biggest issue comes down to communication. Becky, you said you worked in Kansas for a couple of years. What were your observations when you were down there, and did you do any forecasting of severe weather?
Oh yeah, that's our main focus in the Wichita office is forecasting and issuing personalized warnings for our clients for severe weather. So I was really immersed in severe weather, and obviously we were in Kansas, so I was surrounded by severe weather. And this was kind of something I wanted to bring up as you guys were talking. These were thoughts that were coming across. The faucets thing, it looks phenomenal, from a weather standpoint. I really question how useful the public is going to find that, because I don't think it clicks that there's severe weather until it's happening, until it scrolls across their TV screen or they see a lightning bolt strike in front of them. I think a lot of times they're so focused going about their day that they don't even stop to think, is there going to be severe weather today? For example, if you guys remember the tornado outbreak of April 14th, 2012, Wichita actually took a direct hit from EF2, EF3, and I had just moved to Kansas, and so I asked my apartment complex, hey, I'm on a second-story apartment, where can I go to be safe? And they sort of laughed it off. They're like, oh, we don't get tornadoes in the city, it's fine, don't worry about it. I was like, okay. And at that point, the high risk had been issued, one of the few day 2 high risks ever. We were full on panic mode, oh my gosh, and it ended up being that my apartment complex got hit by the tornado. I stayed at work the whole day because I felt safe at work. It was one of those things, they have the mentality, it's not going to happen to me until it happens to them, and it's so frustrating.
Well, this is in Kansas? They didn't have a plan?
What? No. Honestly, it astounded me.
That is terrifying, and oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You think of all places, Kansas, or Oklahoma. That's maybe the next level up of not having a plan if you live in Oklahoma. But wow.
I was shocked.
It's lack of respect for severe weather, and I was telling Dakota this when we had that severe weather in New England a couple weeks ago. If you have a foot of snow that's expected overnight and you publish a story about it, it's going to get thousands of shares. And then you think that you're going to get hit with damaging winds and you publish a story. No one cares. No one cares until they don't have power and the trees smash through their house. So,
and I think it's really similar with flooding too. People just think that they can, willy-nilly drive through a little bit of rain until it floats their car away, and they're like, oh, well, this is a problem. It's really frustrating.
I remember it was some AMS symposium, I don't know how many years ago, and it was a social scientist talking about when people take warnings seriously, and it's like they have to see the warning somewhere, they have to hear someone talk about the warning, whether it's on TV or on a laptop, then they have to go talk to someone else about the warning, and then they have to actually see the thing that's warned, and that's when it clicks. So it's obviously that's kind of a general case, but I guess that's what they found on average, was it was kind of like they need all these confirmation steps to really take action on a warning. I believe this is focused on severe weather particularly.
So I guess my question stemming from that then, is it, and I feel like a lot of times meteorologists take to heart, that people didn't heed warnings, or people are hurt in severe weather, and we take that personally, like, well, was our forecast not good enough? Did we not communicate the threats well enough? And is it really on us, or is it on the public at a certain point to step up and prepare for themselves? At what point do we stop taking, kind of the responsibility to heart?
I think that's a big area of study right now for social scientists working with meteorologists to figure out how they can make the warning, I guess, cause more people to take action. Like, what makes people really take action? I don't know if it's having to, like, sensationalize it, or, like, they do the tornado emergency for a particularly dangerous kind of situation, and that is a thing that grabs attention, I think, pretty immediately. But that's only for the very, very most intense tornado outbreaks. So for all the other tornadoes that happen that don't get a tornado emergency, I guess it's more difficult to grab people's attention to take warning. Although one of the things that was brought up last week is it's encouraging to see some school districts cancel class before a big severe weather outbreak. We've seen it, I guess, in the southeast and in the plains. So it looks, I think it's getting better and better. Every year it seems like we're taking more precautions. And then the other side of the story is if you're not ready, then becoming ready right when you hear that warning.
Yeah, I've heard James Spann say before, if your forecast isn't acted on, it wasn't effective. It's worthless. I believe that's what he said, something to that effect, where it's the action that matters. If you're able to get people to act, that's what's important. But Becky brings up a good point. Where is the line drawn? I would say not selfishly, but one of the concerns perhaps with younger people straying away from TV, if that's 100% true, a lot of things are consensus, but they're not 100% certain when it comes to TV and the way things are going in weather communication. But when you're breaking things up into all these different areas to get your information, and the concern would be, is it effective? Is it as effective? Is it less effective? And I would say my concern is that far too many people rely on the native weather app that's in a phone. The one that shows one icon and one number, and it has no text or something to that effect. I think with all this fragmentation, it may be harder to get to people in times of urgent need, when a tornado is approaching, or a squall line with hail and wind. So it's tough. It's a tough time, no doubt.
Well, I mean, speaking of apps, though, actually, one of the blogs I posted, I think just a couple of days ago, I talk about a few apps that can actually push notifications to you. Accuweather is one of the apps. There's an American Red Cross app called Tornado, very fittingly. And these, you can set them to actually push an alert to you when there's a warning issued for your location. I think that's a phenomenal tool to have. Everybody has their phone on them at all times, and say you're not paying attention, you're taking a walk, you're at work, you're driving somewhere, your phone lights up. Oh, there's a severe weather warning. I should probably look into this, pay attention, go talk to somebody about it, get that confirmation.
I think that's a great point. I love push notifications. One thing I particularly love is the emergency alerts that come from the cell phone providers. The things that scare you and
Yes.
make you wonder what's going on.
That's probably the point.
The sound that you've never heard before. I love them. I feel like I don't get them consistently, which makes me wonder what's going on.
Well, what do you mean by that? You don't get them when you're always under either a tornado or a flash flood
I
warning?
guess that's right. It isn't severe thunderstorm warning.
No.
Maybe in the early days it was a time that I didn't get it. I feel like I've maybe missed one or two. I guess it uses your phone's location to determine if you're in the warning or not, but sometimes I guess maybe that could be sketchy if you're on the edge. Yeah,
I've heard that you're not always in the I guess the polygon because the GPS might not be that accurate, or it might think you're in a different. It's based on the cell tower. So if the cell tower, I guess, is in that polygon and you're getting service from that cell tower, then you're going to get the warning even if you're not in the polygon. But if it's a tornado warning, then, I mean, it's fine because, you're probably driving. You're probably not in one spot, right? So I think either way, in that case, it's...
And the other thing I would say about push notifications is, I'm so inclined to say this is less likely with an iPhone, just because I'm an iPhone person and you're Android. But I think software has come a long ways in the last couple of years when it relates to mobile devices. But my concern with some push notifications is that sometimes your apps crash, or they're not really connecting right, or you're not getting updates. Sometimes you have to restart your phone, or worse than that, if a big tornado is coming and it somehow knocks out power in an area that's feeding the cell service or something like that, it's not as robust as, say, NOAA weather radio or the traditional means of communicating warnings. So I think it brings a lot of positives to the table, but it's not completely foolproof.
And I guess no one thing is foolproof. I really think people should have a variety of ways to receive warnings. At one point, I'd like to get across, I think a lot of times, it's kind of a two-part point here. In the plains, there are tornado sirens, and they're great, but people, I think, don't always realize that the tornado sirens are only supposed to reach people that are outdoors. That's not intended for people that are inside. So, and it's actually, you can hear it when you're inside, but only if you're really paying attention. It's quiet, stuff like that. And that's the other point, is that there aren't sirens a lot of places that still get tornadoes. There aren't tornado sirens in the Northeast, and there are tornadoes here a lot. So that's just one way that people may think they have to rely on hearing about severe weather, and it's not always a reliable source.
In your experience in Kansas, were the sirens based on the polygons or the counties?
Oh gosh, that's a really good question. Sedgwick County, where Kansas is a pretty large county. I think it was based on the polygons, if I had to guess. I can't say I paid attention to that.
Yeah, I have no idea how they triggered, but I have been in an area where the sirens are going off, where I wasn't in the polygon, I was in the county. Oof. And it was a really big county. That's not
Weld County?
No, it wasn't. It was actually closer to Denver, but
okay.
And that's not to say that's how it always is. I doubt that's how it always is. Hopefully it's not polygon.
I would hope.
Yeah.
Because you have some big counties out there out west.
Yeah. So tornado sirens are kind of people have strong feelings about them.
They're very antiquated.
Yeah, and so my take on it is that we shouldn't get rid of them because the people that have become used to them, I use them, but we certainly, and we're not pushing them, right? It's old technology, and it's not by any means the most efficient way to get out a warning. But I don't think we should get rid of them though, because that might confuse some of the older folk.
And so you should ask James Spann his thoughts on sirens. Not a
if
fan.
you take some examples, you're not always going to have a phone next to you if you're outside, especially if, say you're like a tree trimmer, or you work with the DOT and you're paving a road, or you're doing something that involves heavy machinery, and you either can't hear the phone or you've set it in a safe spot so it doesn't get wet or crushed. I could see a purpose for the sirens in those situations.
Yeah,
But
that's a good point.
I do know that James Spann is, I think he's against the sirens. So
Yes. From what I
Yeah,
hear.
the bits I've heard on Weather Brains, he is definitely against sirens. I'm going to shift the topic a little bit here. We'll stick to severe weather. I'm curious, Becky, about your thoughts on storm chasing. So I've been chasing a few times. It's way fun, but whenever I do it, I feel a little guilty. I don't get close to the storm because that's stupid. I stay as far away as possible, but being able to see the structure and everything. But sometimes I question if I'm putting myself and other people in danger. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on, and then do you chase at all when it's appropriate?
I don't chase anymore because I live in Pennsylvania now. I did chase when I was in college in Colorado, and then when I lived in Kansas, I did go out several times. I was actually, and this is, I was south. I was about 45 minutes south of Moore in 2013 when they were hit.
Oh.
And that was it was a terrible day. It was a terrible, terrible day, and the guilt and the sorrow I felt. It was really, really hard. I feel pretty similarly to you, Dakota. I think in that it's one of those things that we love weather. It really, it's our passion. It gets us really excited to stand under a storm and feel the outflow or the inflow, and you see just the magnificence of it. It's great, but at the same time, when you know that you see a tornado bearing down on people's livelihoods, it's an awful, awful feeling. And I think there's very different types of chasers. I think there are chasers who do chase to try and get warnings out, to try and notify the NWS and make sure that there's ground truth, and I think that's great. And then I think there are chasers who chase for the thrill of it, and that's also okay if that's what your reasoning is. And then there are chasers who chase the chasers, who don't actually have any idea what they're doing. They just see these vehicles with all the radio antennas and stuff like that, and they follow them, and that creates just mass chaos and havoc. And I think it's become a circus, and I am so glad I don't live out there anymore, to be honest, and have to deal with that, because I think it's an absolute circus at this point.
I have a good story. I was chasing out here in Nebraska, and it was me and a few people. We weren't chasing the chasers. We were chasing the storms and kind of putting ourselves in the right spot. And we turn off of this road onto a busier road, and the next thing we know, there is a train of, I don't know, a dozen or so cars that are all chasing. It's had tornado adventures, and it was crazy. But I was like, okay, so we must be doing something right, because everyone's following us right now. It was the weirdest thing. But you're right, it has become a circus. You see chaser convergence if you're looking at the location of everyone. And to bring this up, we sent out a poll earlier today, and mixed feelings on it, but the majority of our followers don't chase. Only a quarter of them think too many people do it. Half of them don't chase but would like to chase, and another quarter of them do chase. So mixed feelings on the chasing from our followers.
And I guess I see a lot of people putting themselves in danger, and part of it stems from this need and desire to get the perfect image, to be able to get money and recognition. And I think part of it is, honestly, it's stupidity. They don't know their way around a storm. I don't even know my way around a storm. If Tim Samaras, if that intelligent and smart of a man can be caught off guard, and that whole incident, I had met Tim a couple of times. That really hit a lot of people hard, I think. And for me, that sort of ended it. I really didn't have any desire to chase after that, knowing that as much as you might think you know storms, they're still so unpredictable. It doesn't matter. It's scary, and it makes you really, really respect it.
I've never personally chased outside of maybe being in the path of a storm in Lancaster County, the tornado alley of the Northeast. And actually, that was an interesting day. There was actually a barn that got struck by lightning and burned to the ground like a block away. It was kind of surreal. But I would say at least once I'd be interested in going out west and seeing what it's like. I hope my mom's not watching the show. But yeah, I completely agree with what Becky said with Tim. You know, one of the best in storms and in studying storms. If he can be caught in the wrong spot, anyone can. So there's no doubt it's dangerous. I think with social media especially, one thing we're seeing is that it's so easy for the non-meteorologists, the people that are just interested in seeing what's going on. It's very easy for them to follow along and be in the wrong spots and cause congested roads. With Spotter Network, you can see all the red dots on the map, and it's alarming sometimes how many are in or near a storm that's heading right for them. You think, how are they going to survive? So, you know, for those that are experienced and know what they're doing, they may cause issues, because who knows? I've heard some people talking about, you know, police perhaps shutting it down in some areas. I'm not too familiar with that, though.
I don't think it's possible for that to happen, to be honest. They can't. I don't think they can honestly police who's there to chase and who's there to not. I think it's a lot of talk. I don't think anything will actually ever come of it. But it is an interesting discussion that's going on because of all the congestion and people being put in dangerous positions because of the congestion. I think it's interesting.
I know a lot of smart chasers avoid chasing if it's a highly populated area, particularly Oklahoma. I feel like they have a lot of chases or a lot of severe weather events in highly populated metro areas, and that's just a scenario for a disaster there.
Yeah. I guess my advice, if you really want to chase, is go out on a high-risk, high-reward day. Go out on a low, marginal risk, or, a low-end moderate risk when people are not really excited about it, and go to find a place that if it goes, it goes, and it's going to, be really, really going to be some good storms. But I would have never, ever, ever, ever recommend going out on a high-risk day. Even a moderate risk is pushing it, because those are the days that everybody's out.
So we have a question here. That's some good advice. And we have a question here from Twitter. It's from Potomac Weather at Potomac WX, and they say, "Hello. Are severe weather outbreaks common in the northeast U.S. during the winter, or is it too cold for severe weather?" Tyler, you're I guess both of you are in the northeast, so I'll let you guys take that one.
Tyler, you've probably been here longer, so go for it.
I would say they're not common. Once you get into New England, they're not common in January, February, March, or I would even lump in December. But this year was the exception. We had temperatures in the probably close to 70s. Hard to remember now. It seems like it's warm every week. But before that severe line came through a couple of weeks back, it was really warm. We had no snow. We had no snow on the ground. We had very moist air coming in, and we had an outbreak that was worse than anything we saw last summer. So the answer to the question is no, they're not common here in New England, but they can happen. And the prime example is just a couple of weeks ago in February. It was crazy. Hard to comprehend that storms would make it all the way to the Atlantic Ocean near Boston at 4 a.m. in February. I mean, unheard of.
I know those tornadoes in southern Pennsylvania were very rare. I forget the stat. It was like there had only been 2 other tornadoes or something in February in Pennsylvania, something like that. So
very low number.
There was an EF2 as well, so pretty strong.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to completely change subjects, and I have to talk about this because you wrote a piece for the Capital Weather Gang, or unless it Actually, was it just the Washington Post?
Yeah, it was just Washington Post.
Yeah, so it was titled "Don't Be Mad at Your Meteorologist for a Poor Forecast. We're mad enough at ourselves." And this was great. It really created a lot of buzz, especially I didn't see public buzz. I just saw the meteorologist buzz, and I loved it. Just to start, it was awesome. I feel like that something like that needed to be out there, needed to be written. But I'm curious. I'm going to play devil's advocate. Someone says we need some sort of public outcry during, I don't know, poorly forecast events to pressure us to improve. How do you respond? I'm not saying that's how I feel, but how do you respond to someone who says that?
That I don't blame them. I mean, the weather has such a great impact on people's lives. They're really depending on us to get it right. And when it goes so far south, you know, the forecast goes totally awry. I don't blame people for being upset. I really, really don't. I guess I just was hoping for a little more understanding from people, to understand that it's really difficult, and that we fully understand that your life is impacted by the weather. And I guess I would just hope that people could be a little more productive with their criticism, and that's probably asking too much. It's really the nastiness that gets to me. I don't have a problem with you saying, hey, your forecast was awful. I got 2 inches and you forecasted I was going to get a foot. What happened? Like, that's great. By all means, ask us questions. Ask us what happened. But when you criticize and say, oh, you're terrible at your job, you shouldn't get paid, you should be fired, I hate you, like, there's so much vitriol aimed at meteorologists, and that's what I really take issue with.
Do you agree that the discussion is much nastier online than it is in person?
Yes, I'm not really in the public spotlight, so I don't know if, I mean, you're an on-air broadcaster, Tyler. Have you ever had people come up to you and say, hey, your forecast was terrible? I mean, are you recognized to the point of people approaching you?
I would say, you know, especially with tours, more so tours and stuff, you know, you get the classic, oh, you're a weather person, you'd be wrong all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think I've ever had a nasty, like, threatening comment yet, obviously being the key word. I will say I was forecasting the snowstorm last winter in Western Mass, and my forecast was for 12 to 18. Some got 5, and I could not have felt worse, and I'll remember that for the rest of my forecasting career. And I didn't really get a whole lot of backlash over it. We you know, kind of had some fun with it the next morning when some people didn't get, you know, got a foot less. Big deal. But yeah, I've been a little bit lucky that I haven't gotten a threat or something like that yet. But you know, occasionally there's some nastiness online. People don't have to show their face online, so
Right.
I put less weight into it. You could say whatever you want online. It's nothing like in person.
Yeah, it's really easy to hide behind your computer screen and talk a big talk.
I agree. I don't have to deal with that ever, but I certainly enjoyed and appreciated that write if you did. So I think the entire weather community was thanking you for writing that.
I was just glad to be given the opportunity to say what everyone has always kind of wanted to say.
Yeah.
I don't know that it really I don't know that it hit home with the people that it was really intended to hit home with. You know, they're the ones you're never really going to get through to.
Yeah.
I read some of the comments.
Control-C, save the link, send it to everyone that sends you a nasty remark.
I just had to refrain from reading the comments.
Yeah, sometimes you have to do that.
It's not worth it.
Well, wow, that went by really fast. That's actually going to do it for us tonight. Thank you so much, Becky, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This was a lot of fun.
And if you want to follow Becky, you can find her work at the Stormblog at Accuweather.com, and you can follow her on Twitter at AccuWXBeck. And you can find us on Twitter at the WX Junkies. We're on Facebook. You can listen to the podcast on SoundCloud, YouTube, on iTunes. And if you're listening to iTunes, please give us a rating or a review, whether it's good or bad. We just want to hear from you. For Becky, Tyler, and myself, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.